We're following the breaking news. President Trump threatening the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell with termination, just one day after Powell warned that Trump's trade war could have truly devastating consequences for the U.S. economy. Let's discuss this and more with Democratic Congresswoman Chellie Pingree of Maine. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. If the president actually fires Powell, what could that do to the central bank's independence?
Look, there is already so much financial turmoil going on, whether it's the stock market or the bond market. I think this would cause an incredible upset, just as his tariffs have caused in my state and across the country.
The chairman, Powell, warned the president's trade policy could lead to higher inflation and slower growth if tariffs remain in effect. How are businesses in your district bracing for that possibility? And you're in Maine. And do you see a global recession as a likely outcome as well?
Well, we're certainly hearing more people talk about a global recession. And just bringing it back to my state of Maine, we're surrounded by 3 different Canadian provinces. So we have great concerns above and beyond what's going on in many other states. But I've heard from so many business people that they don't know how their supply chain is going to go. They're worried about their own exports. We have some very specific industries, wild blueberries, lobsters, softwood lumber, that are extremely dependent on our trade with Canada, but also there is some impact with China. We also have shipbuilding, so steel and aluminum. There are just so many things to take into consideration, and people didn't expect this out of the president. Maybe he talked about tariffs, but they thought it would be a more sensible move. They thought it was to bring back manufacturing, and it would be done in a systemic way. This is so chaotic. Nobody knows what to predict. And in terms of our Canadian neighbors, they're just mad at us all the time.
As you know, Congresswoman, many of your fellow Democrats have been criticized for not having a unified position on Trump's trade war. For example, your fellow Maine Democrat Congressman Jared Golden has largely been supportive of these various tariffs. Does your party need a more coherent message?
Look, trade is complicated and tariffs are complicated. And one of the reasons my colleague feels that way is because Maine is one of those states that was really damaged by NAFTA. We lost a lot of our manufacturing, and there are still people who are hoping that tariffs will bring back manufacturing. And I fully understand that. It's just the way the president is going about doing it that is so chaotic, that doesn't make an investment in manufacturing and doesn't think about all the other things that we're concerned about raw materials, about labor markets. There's a lot that has to go on to make sure you can have stable manufacturing in our state. So the idea that we would have a coherent message or there's just one way to go about doing this, that's just not true. I would say most Democrats are opposed to the tariffs, but you're not going to get 100% on anything. And there are some arguments about why tariffs could be useful if they were used well.
Good point. Congresswoman Chellie Pingree of Maine, thanks so much for joining us.